Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the FML podcast. Joined today by Holly and Laura, both owners and co-founders of Financielle. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us. And on a Friday afternoon, you're pushing your luck here. Don't know what's going to come out, but
I did think actually it might be better doing this podcast or recording earlier on in the week. It almost feels criminal as well not to do it with a beer or a glass of wine in hand as well, actually.
On a Friday especially, so absolutely.
Exactly that. I want to hand over to both of you, and you can introduce yourselves and then talk about what Financielle is.
Absolutely. So we are sisters and co-founders, a right old family business. I'm not sure how many fintechs are family owned. We, in a previous life, were not in financial services, but we both approached a problem and didn't see a solution, and so started the Financielle journey. But it started off as an Instagram page that I started in 2018 with no intention of it being a venture. It was just kind of a space for me to share my direct views on what I referred to as financial wellness, probably long before it was a buzzword really in the space. You know, I've been on a personal journey when it came to money. My background is law, so I was a graduate lawyer with an okay graduate salary and never any money and never any really basic financial education from family, from school, even from work. If you think about it, I was on a really good graduate scheme. And I opted out of my pension at 22. So if that's the context and the starting point, you know, on a personal level, I went on a long journey and kind of was overwhelmed by financial education and literacy and thought this must be more simple. There must be a simple way to manage your money. And yeah, over 10 years, developed a system called the Financielle Playbook, which is basically, we call it the couch to 5K for money, which is doing one thing at a time. The long story short is I came up with this concept and presented it to the early Financielle community on Instagram. And then Holly came left field and said, right, let's commercialize it.
Yeah, I suppose my background is commercializing things. That's my passion. I saw that there were a lot of other brands or say influencers in that kind of fintech space on Instagram that were monetizing partnerships and things and kind of growing their community to scale and make it an actual business. My background's in partnerships and sponsorships. Started my career at Manchester United and then moved to Laura poached me. So there's obviously a common theme where we just follow each other around. Our careers, we can't stay away from each other for too long. Yeah, Laura poached me in our last job that we worked in together. And then when the pandemic hit, Laura's account kind of got bombarded with people asking for help. And obviously, Laura's not financially regulated. That's not her area of expertise. So couldn't give advice, but said, you know, I've got this plan that I've done myself. Like, I'm going to write it down. And our MVP, I suppose, was a digital ebook that we sold online. It was £50 a go. Laura at first started to give it away to people for free, and I suppose that's where I stepped in. People weren't necessarily doing it, and Laura always says you've got to have a bit of skin in the game. So you could genuinely go on YouTube and get fit with all the free videos that are out there. How many people actually do that? Not many. If you go to a personal trainer and you've got to hand a bit of money over, there's some friction and accountability there, and people will turn up for a personal training session. So we kind of commercialized it and sold it, and about 600 people went through the MVP. But Laura's very passionate about seeing something come to life and wanted to show that with this plan, people's debts were going down and assets were going up. So knew that it needed to be more of like a 3D product. And that's where Laura's passion for product came in.
And the app was born. So yeah, that's the longish story actually. We didn't go short, did we, for you? But hopefully that gives context to a business that was never meant to be a business that's now a business.
Some of the best businesses start that way, right? Because it's born more for passion rather than trying to find a product for an audience. You've got the audience and you're building a product around them that they actually need. Now that you've got that sort of 3D product that you mentioned, which is the app, how does that kind of differ from other sort of budgeting type of apps, other fintech apps that are out there? What sort of sets your product apart?
So I think that's so interesting. I think it's because it starts with education first. So the big point about budgeting is I think a lot of the current features and market leading apps are so impressive, but they're directed towards people that are really into budgeting and really passionate about their finances already. The other thing is they're all the same. When you think about basic go-to-market strategy, we call it red and blue ocean. And the red ocean is very busy, lots of Series A raises, lots of similar features. I imagine lots of fighting over the same talent to basically build the same apps. They're all doing, retrospective budgeting reviews. Well, that's no use after the moment's gone. What about helping someone to effectively plan forward? Also, a lot of them, we call them passive budgeting. So for example, some of the leading ones good at rounding up your spending in the background. Well, that's fine, but it's quite mindless and it's all right for saving a little bit in the background. But if you wanted to aggressively go for a goal, a bit like fitness, we do link it to fitness a lot, don't we? Because it's that kind of gamification of it. You have to know a bit of theory, so you have to know a bit of education, and then you have to apply it and learn from it. That's why we call it the couch to 5K, because not only is it one thing at a time, so that it's more digestible for those people that might not necessarily be massive into personal finance, but it also is something you can get better and better and better at every month. So for the moment, we like that our app isn't integrated, it's not open banking, it's literally a machine like a MyFitnessPal in your pocket where you enter your data and kind of see how you perform afterwards. So we're very happy to be in the personal finance space, but we're glad we're not like everyone else.
You kind of mentioned being quite aggressive as opposed to sort of that the passive sort of roundup apps, etc. When you say aggressive, what do you mean by that? I mean, are we trying to sort of chop down serious amounts of debt here? Could you expand on that a little bit further?
So we recognise that people come to our community when there's some sort of life trigger. So we call them life triggering events. So it could be that someone's like just found out they're pregnant, or they're getting a divorce, or they are looking to buy their first home with their partner, whatever it might be. So people tend to come to us when something is pushing them to sort their finances out. We call it you get your shit together time, and everyone resonates with that. They go, yeah, there was a point in my life where I went, right, adulthood is here, I need to get my shit together. Like, I cannot continue having, spending £500 on buy now, pay later every month buying clothes and going out for dinner every night in London and having an expensive gym membership when actually I've got this really big goal that's kind of like sitting on my shoulder I'm never going to hit. So when Laura says about aggressively or passively paying off debt or saving, some of the AI technology that's out there is incredible. It's very expensive though, and like Laura said, everyone's kind of fighting in the same space. It's got to be a bit painful. Like Laura always says, you can't learn to run sitting on the couch. Like, it just doesn't happen. You're not going to get fitter. You're not going to get better. You have to go through a bit of pain to kind of come out the other side. And we see a lot of people that come to our community, like absolute novices when it comes to personal finance, never touched a budget in their life, possibly dallying with a bit of buy now, pay later or traditional debt like a credit card. And they just want to get the shit together because they're never gonna get to the goal.
And I think what we then do is, like, in our content in the app, I feel the majority of fintech content's vanilla. People like Monzo and some of the fun they have with data and social, it really, I love it all the time, especially being a northerner. The Greggs versus Pret thing was great, but it's very vanilla. Maybe it's because they're regulated and they have to be very, very careful, but actually no one's quite decisive and opinionated. And so what we try to do with our educational content is challenge an individual using psychology, which is you can do whatever you want. If you want to eat out every night, and if you want to have cars on finance, and if you want to use buy now, pay later, that's fine. But let me just explain to you what it's actually doing. It's stealing from your income. It's mindless. It's actually, you're paying everyone else before you're paying your own goal. And if you use that kind of personal trainer psychology, it's then down to the individual to decide, do I move to the next step, which is, okay, I'm going to say goodbye to debt forever, or I'm going to set myself an investment goal. It kind of does. Whereas a lot of fintechs, I say, stay in the vanilla space, which is obviously non-advisory. And that's where we stay. We don't advise. We just kind of lift the lid on how these products work and say, make a choice. It seems to have this kind of kick up the bum feeling behind it. And people just go, right, I'm going all in. And we say to people, you can go all in this month and then back off next month if you want to. But people, it's like when you get a bit obsessed with something, like people just get on a roll and they flourish.
You find that in a relationship as well, sometimes there's always like a money geek, and a lot of the money geeking people come out when they finally get control of the money and they see the control that they can have. And if they do a bit of this jiggery pokery, they can literally accelerate a house in 12 months rather than what would probably be like 3 years if they're just messing at it. So yeah, there's a lot of passionate people that have come out of financial.
Yeah, I'm probably in that camp. Everything's on a spreadsheet. Everything's worked out.
You're the geek.
Yeah. I can't stand debt. All credit cards always get paid up at the end of the month. I'm quite rigorous on that sort of stuff. Although my head of performance marketing is actually a step above that. He's quite into the FIRE movement, I think it is.
That's
and
intense.
It is. Him and I have spoken about it, and I've got to say fair play to him, because he'll probably retire way better than I will, to be fair. So,
but it's all personal. I think that's the point, and I think that's what we try and challenge people to do, which is you're on a personal journey. So some people want to go all in, some people want to go 50%, some people change it up depending on time of year, time of life. You might want to go all in to hit a certain medium-term goal, but you're not ready for FIRE. And so you kind of find your space and you go at your pace. We talk about financial wellness, and the ultimate thing for financial wellness is control, and you being in control and deciding, rather than all these products and services deciding for you.
I agree. I think your point about control is probably the most important thing. I suppose the one angle that I haven't personally looked at is, and maybe that's just my personality, mine's always sort of that always on. Whereas I quite like that flexibility that you're talking about, of not necessarily, being that hardcore every single month. I think my family would appreciate that if I took that tack, actually.
All right, you'll be getting an invite link to our app after this.
I'm already signed up to your app.
I feel like you're going to like it.
I'm already signed up to your app. I signed up earlier on in the week, actually. So I'd have a bit of a mooch around. My sort of relationship with money kind of stems from my family. My parents were, particularly on my dad's side, he was quite sort of poor growing up. So there was always that sort of fear of suddenly becoming poor again overnight. My dad, my uncles, they are generally very financially literate. And then my wife's exactly the same as well. And maybe that's sort of like an ethnic thing as well, being Indian, that we're also very, very sort of focused around that. Mm-hmm. And I never kind of understood how or why everybody else wasn't necessarily like that. Again, that was down to my family and stuff. So with my children, or my 5-year-old is sort of verging upon that. And I'm trying to teach him the value of a pound, although he's not quite getting it just yet. What are your views on the state of financial literacy in the UK? What are your views on, say, financial institutions and their responsibility about teaching financial literacy to people as well?
It's such an interesting question. I mean, everyone all the time asks us, when are you doing it for kids next? It's like, okay, well, can we corner this market first and then expand it? My background with financial literacy was our parents, when they were growing up, didn't have anything, and then actually worked their way up and ended up with a comfortable life, but no financial literacy, to the point where now they kind of follow the Financielle plan. When you were at school, I remember traditional banks like the Yorkshire Building Society or Halifax would come in and feed your children, and you'd open your first savings account and you get a little book. And at least then it was teaching you about the basics. What's happened in financial services since probably the early 90s is this hyper promotion of product, and it's been product pushing to the point. And then obviously we had some financial crashes and the mistrust of financial services, to the point where, in fact, I've got one here. I'm not sure the details, but another thing from NatWest trying to sell me another loan every month. Like, do they not understand that I'm the last person to open a loan? Look at my financial background. However, if you offer me an ISA, I probably would go for it. And so the banks and fintechs should bring literacy and education and context to what they do, but they just don't. And if they did now, would people trust it? Because ultimately they are trying to profit from upselling an overdraft, upselling loans. Obviously now we've got buy now, pay later. So I think that there's a lot more to do to prepare our younger children to be better with finances. One of our next kind of stages, and we've had quite a lot of interest from universities into our products, where actually if you can help someone with that first paycheck, that first one, which is, look, you're still at home maybe and you've got your student loans, but actually you want a home, what are your goals? And if you stay away from debt, and if you kind of the things that you probably know already, that could set them off on a really good track.
I think you always use it as like the smoking analogy. Like, if you obviously we're in this market, our core demographic is for people around age 25 to 45. We're trying to reverse sometimes bad habits that have been generated across like a few generations and for quite a few years. Whereas if we can get to people younger, so them not start smoking, i.e. not get into debt and not, push themselves financially, it's the education point. And everyone says you need to get into education. Everyone's begging us, all the kind of counsellors that we speak to, they're like, we need this. We're seeing such young people coming to us already with debt worries. And obviously we know the big connection between mental health and financial worries as well is just so high. There is a lot to do, but like Laura said, I think the banks have gone too far in that there's just the trust isn't there. I think people don't go to them for financial education. They're actually turning to people like us, and social channels like FinTok's a big thing at the moment, where a lot of financial influencers are going onto TikTok, and that Gen Z audience are loving that content. Obviously, there's some dangers in there because some people talk about trading and it's unregulated, but actually the majority of people that we see in the content that they've got is the type of stuff that you should be taught in schools. So people are kind of taking it upon themselves, like us, to go, we can explain it to you much easier than like Barclays would, or
in 60 seconds with a personal face.
Yeah, those little snapshots of small bits of information, which is how they consume content now.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about when you said like Halifax coming into the school and getting you to open up an account, and for me, I just saw that as, looking at it now retrospectively, that's just a cheaper way for them to acquire their users. And 100%. That's it, really, right? So
there was a complete it was loyalty. So obviously the switching service and the kind of 14-day switch guarantee that kind of came in was to stop this kind of loyalty that would happen just because, I've always banked with Halifax, and it was because at 7 they came into your school and sold you your first account, and then at 16 you got your letter on your 16th birthday saying, would you like a credit card, or 18 or whatever. So it's funny when you sit back and go, would they be allowed to do that now?
And then they come in, like we see it in workplaces as well, like traditional banks coming in to like help people with like money management and actually to sell them a mortgage or a credit card or a loan. So I think unfortunately for the legacy banks, people are starting to see through that, like what you would say in inverted commas, education. It's not, it's just a product upsell, unfortunately.
Are you reconsidering your childhood now?
No. I was actually thinking about the affinity between choosing your bank brand and smoking. For the marketers out there that have seen Mad Men, there's that scene where Don Draper asks the waiter or something, why did he choose to smoke that particular brand? He said, well, they gave it to him in the service or whatever it is, and he smoked it ever since.
Yeah.
And it's just that thing, like, get in early enough to create that brand affinity. If your parents have banked with HSBC, you'll probably bank with HSBC.
Yeah.
I was just sort of thinking about that. We talked about banks a lot. I'm not saying that, we're letting fintechs off the hook a little bit. I think we have let some of the fintechs off the hook, but it's coming to light now, certainly around sort of buy now, pay later and kind of what's going on there. And I know you've got some strong views around that. Is buy now, pay later any different from a credit card in your view? Is it worse? Is it better? Is it just the same? Or where does it stand with you?
Completely the same. It was interesting, and we won't mention any brands, not least because we don't want any cease and desist letters, and we believe some of them are very active in that space. But one of them, the CEO of one of them was very clear that, this is a good thing because it's not as bad as a credit card, because what it was doing is giving you credit with a kind of limit. And then one of them brought out a card yesterday or the day before, and suddenly you can use buy now, pay later everywhere. And it's kind of like, so in the beginning it was because credit cards are evil. So what we do with buy now, pay later, Holly especially is very passionate about the fact that they target women. Because women are in control of 85% of the world's spending. So whilst women have less investments and there's the gender pay gap, we also spend more because we spend on behalf of ourselves and the families, not least because we're also targeted aggressively by marketing agencies to buy Zara hauls, buy the latest makeup or hair trend, and then influencers push that on women as well. And rightly or wrongly, and whether women are completely in control of what they spend and they're also not stupid, it's a movement which is trying to take money off women. And when you add buy now, pay later on as a layer, you're then getting them to buy more than they can afford. So we were on a financial inclusions panel, weren't we, Holly? And I think, I'd done some research on 95% of buy now, pay later is spent on fashion and beauty. So it's not spent on like a washing machine because someone had an emergency issue, or a cooker, or maybe it's school clothes because that would fall into that category. But people aren't using it responsibly. Once you've used it once, there's no point to it, is there?
No, I think buy now, pay later used to position themselves as like the stopgap, so you don't have to go to like a loan shark or a payday loan, and they were like the good guys because it's not percent and you don't have to pay fees ever. Well, I think once everyone's stripping it back and there's going to be regulation soon, you can see that that's not necessarily the case. And 75% of people that use buy now, pay later are females between the ages of like 18 and 25, I think. So they've got a core market of people that they're targeting, and basically it's females, and it's to part with money to spend on beauty and clothing. And then the card that's now been introduced where you don't even have to be a retailer that offers buy now, pay later, and people can supersede it by using this card. It's just a scary space.
And for that young generation, it's one of the first interactions they have with credit. Step Change have done a really, is it Step Change or Citizens Advice? Maybe Citizens Advice done a really good report on it. It came out in September, and it was just kind of saying that people don't understand it's credit. And it is credit, and just because it wasn't regulated and it is going to be now, it's still, they just didn't think it was credit. Half the time they didn't know they'd used it because the frictionless process on checkout is so slick that kind of half the time you don't realize. And your basket value goes up 58%. And so when we explain that to people and go, yeah, it's not percent if you pay it on time and if it's all okay, you've spent more. And it's not that the bad guys, they spot a gap in the market. And quite frankly, the M&A and acquisitions in the buy now, pay later space is scary. I mean, some of the biggest fintechs in the world are buy now, pay later. It's just really sad that that's a part of our strategy. Like as a fintech vertical, the buy now, pay later brands are kind of at the top right now. And some of them like to think that they focus on financial wellness and education one at a time, but they're just not. And so I think what we like being is, again, this point of alternative. So we can lift the lid on the product and explain to people how it works and not say it's bad or good, just this is literally the reality. And then what happens is, if you've got buy now, pay later this month and you buy one thing and you split it in 3, then you've got 3 payments. But if you buy another one next month, then that's another 3 payments. And there's this kind of snowball effect that eventually people in our community would come to us to help them clear their ongoing account as if it was just one line of credit. So yeah, as you can tell, we're very passionate about it. And we're just really interested in to see how the space develops over the next few years, I guess.
I think there's a time and place, and like you said, like it's an emergency purchase. It's got its benefits. It boils back down to that financial literacy, that education around it, and actually understanding the impact of mounting debt and how that can impact you, and how difficult it is to then come out from underneath that and the sacrifices that you then need to make. Right? I love this subject. I love talking about personal finance. I'm an avid money saving expert reader, and if there's a coupon, I'll find it and I'll use it.
I bet you wouldn't use buy now, pay later.
I have used it, but I've used it more around the fact of I'm doing a big shop from like ASOS or something like that, or Next or whatever it is, and I know I'm going to send most of it back. So I'll go and buy 10 pairs of jeans and then I'll send the other 9 back and keep one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do use it for that one, but I think sometimes we then go, but then they're so good. Like the marketing is incredible. Like so many other brands that aren't buy now, pay later are just so envious of the fact that the marketing and the messaging and the technology just keeps bringing people back for more. And I think with young people, that's where we worry that they get these big Shein hauls and these Zara hauls and these buy now, pay later, and then they've spent like 58% more than they would. That's the draw for retailers to use buy now, pay later.
And they're banking on you not sending it back. So you being busy and forgetting to send your 8 pairs of jeans. But to that point, and to the marketing efforts behind some of these brands, that's one of their USPs. So you were able to perfectly articulate their USP, which is, if you're not going to keep them all, why use your money, send it back?
Exactly,
that's one of their USPs. So it's perfect. And it's a genuine, like I said, it's a genuine use for it. They're just banking that 50% of people that do that just get stuck with 8 pairs of jeans.
Well, yeah, you'd probably end up keeping a couple of pairs. I'm a little bit tighter than that. So yeah, it's not going to happen on my side. Should we switch streams into marketing a little bit? You've been talking about like influencers and FinTok and calls and, these guys using obviously influencers and social media. Well, Financielle has basically been on the ground of obviously building community. And you kind of mentioned sort of pre-show that your social channels, you sort of built them up around, since 2018. How have you approached building community? Why do you think you've been successful with that?
When it started as an Instagram page first, what happened on Instagram around 2016, 17, 18 was the concept of mini niches and communities. So the hashtag strategy really allowed customers or users to find their people and find their community. And, if you were interested in calisthenics and food or gym was a big thing for females, actually. A lot of people are intimidated about doing weights in the gym, and suddenly you found this female weightlifting community where you could feel confident about going to gym. So you could find your people and you could find, your place. Our content at that time, using certain strategies and also recommendations, if people realized there was this big underground money community on Instagram. In a technical marketeer's armory, you're trying to look what people are talking about, you're trying to understand what people think and feel, and trying to find your tribe. And actually, we started in that space because we were just part of that tribe, not because we were trying to convert them to anything or bring them off platform. They weren't leads to us, they're just real people. So I think we've got an unfair advantage in that it was a community for being a community's sake, because The other thing about community, and we did end up building a SaaS platform off Instagram first before we developed the app, because we wanted to have a safe space where people could be a bit more open and transparent and also help each other. Like, a really important thing about a community is peer-to-peer support, not platform to community support, because otherwise it's just one-dimensional, and it's meant to be collaborative. The combination of really listening to what people are talking about, even like on Instagram, asking people how they're feeling, asking them what they're worried about. That's a perfect content research. You don't have to go on all these SEO websites to tell you what people's problems are. Ask them on your platform, build a relationship with them. Don't look like you're just selling to them all the time. So I think we had the upper hand.
Yeah, I think you were very conscious that the big difference between community and an audience, because we built up an audience base probably of about maybe like 8,000, 6,000 to 8,000 maybe, before we then decided to go onto a SaaS platform and create the Financielle community. So we put that friction in place to show that anyone that left Instagram, because it's so sticky, they want to keep you on there, to physically go and join another area of the internet and join in a conversation about money, that they genuinely wanted to be there, that they were genuinely wanting to get better with their money, or that they wanted to be in a vulnerable place where they can share personal stories or whatever it might be. Yes, that was kind of a good measure of, I think, what community is, like bringing someone along with you. A lot of fintechs are guilty of creating forums and asking people about functionality of their app. Like, you'll see them all the time. They say, "We've got this amazing community." I'm like, "Tell me about your community then." Like,
do you know them? Could you?
We've got a Financielle baby in Australia. We know that the lady that joined the community didn't think that she'd be able to have a second child, did the Financielle playbook, was in the community all the time, commented, and then came to us and said, "I've just had like the first Financielle baby. You help me do that." Like, not
so by the way, through IVF, not because we connected her with a partner that give her a baby. Like,
I didn't make any assumptions.
No, but like those personal stories, like, I think that's what constitutes as community. And my role as community manager, I'm redundant now because they answer themselves. I can't get on there quick enough. So someone will say, like, "I've got a friend that," and they're talking about themselves or whatever, like their partner won't do like a joint account or whatever it might be. And I'll go on to respond, and someone else like from the community's gone in there and answered straight away. It's very self-sufficient now.
But it's definitely about coming together around a central purpose. And so that's where I think some fintech brands could really take advantage. Like, what do they stand for? Like, for example, PensionBee is a brand we like. We work with PensionBee. They have an opportunity, and if Jasper hears this, he'll be like, "Okay, could you not strategize for me?" But they have an opportunity to bring people together and build a movement around making pensions simple and really being a bit more direct about the problems with pensions and how there's a solution and people's experiences. We have a member of our community who used their product and whose life has changed because she is so focused on retirement than ever before. She had really old-fashioned platforms before. She separated from a partner. Again, we know the personal story because this is about community. She was separated from a partner, didn't know whether she'd be able to retire, thought she was going to have to work until she was about 90, did our plan, found a provider, and now any extra money she ever gets, it goes into her pension, which is with PensionBee. She sees it on the app, it makes her comfortable. They brought all her other pensions in and made it simple. What a story. It's about gathering together around a central purpose or goal and feeling like you've got a bit of a tribe alongside you. And it's hard to do, and it's a lot of effort, and it's also not quick. You're not going to get like a CPA result quickly from building community. But actually, there's just some gems that come out of it, from product development, from content development, and just wins.
A bit of a curveball, or perhaps just to stick it on you a little bit. Is it scalable though? In 3 years' time, is Financielle going to be able to maintain that connection with the community? How are you going to do that?
It's a good question. I mean, Laura was very passionate when we were building the app. It launched in October to have the community embedded in there, because otherwise we're going to be spreading ourselves so thin across so many platforms. We've got followings on Instagram, TikTok, this separate community, our email marketing, our app. There's so many ways in which you can interact with us. But yeah, community was one of the first things that Laura was like, this has to be in the app. So I think when we scale in terms of like growing numbers and conversions to download the app, that one of the first things they see is that they can join a community of like-minded people.
I think so. I really like what Finamize have done. I've been a Finamize user myself for quite a long time. Community can mean lots of things. So, the forum, will it last? I don't know. I think community is moving on. We've now got the NFT space. People are moving into different types of communities. But I think if you believe that it's this concept that you come together around a single goal, and for us, it's for people trying to be financially well, and new people come in all the time, and then people get experienced at that. So if you think about a community ecosystem, you've got people that are experienced and people that are novices and people in the middle, and they all help each other. You can do that around events, and you could do that on your social channels, and you can do that in a forum. And so our key task is, how do we keep people engaged and make them feel part of a community? It may not be scalable. That will be the challenge for us, because what we know is when they feel part of something special, the more engaged and the more likely to be a high lifetime value, the more likely to stay with us for longer, the less likely to churn, and the more likely to just do amazingly with their money.
What does the path of growth look like for you now? I mean, you mentioned some stuff sort of earlier on that you're dabbling into sort of new channels now. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and the plan for growth for the year ahead?
We've been completely organic up until December. We're trying to focus on the product. There's, two of us plus an engineering team. So we were kind of doing everything, and it was what we knew. We always wanted to launch the beta version of the app to our existing community, and it was like a safe space to kind of get feedback and see if it landed well. So growth is our new journey, and we're certainly up for experimentation, and we're certainly up for getting it wrong. We love long form content because it's where you can really get under the skin of some detail. So we are putting effort into SEO like everyone else, but the SEO that we would like, so the kind of content that we think people would really like to read. At the opposite end, we're still looking at short form, chopping some of that long form up into digestible chunks and testing which platforms work for us. For example, TikTok works if you're controversial. If you have a direct point to make, the account will blow up because it's something of interest and something that you may have pointed to someone that they've not known before. On the other side, we're looking at paid. So we're looking at paid socials and seeing how that performs. All a big test. And we definitely see massive jumps when someone like an influencer maybe recommends us and it comes left field.
Yeah, it's not a paid opportunity, unfortunately, or fortunately for us it is, as we're in this like bootstrap stage. But yeah, when we're looking at the metrics this morning, and an influencer mentioned us. We've got a life admin area in our app that's really helpful. It's completely free, and she was just like, my life admin's shit, and I just happened to message her and say, like, we've got a great free functionality. You can put all your like car insurance, policy number, how much it is, all your logins, whatever it might be, and then it'll remind you like 6 weeks before, and that's when you get the best deal. Just like, this is incredible, here, community, have it. She has like 170,000 followers. We're at about 23.7. I think we'll increase in app downloads, like just from that mention, that organic bit of growth.
Yeah. So I think we definitely, we're getting some extra support in the growth and marketing phases, because we're not technical marketeers, and we absolutely see the value in having that expertise in-house. We definitely don't want to do spray and pray. We're measuring every week. We're doing specific analysis. We're doing specific planning just to see what works and what doesn't.
I was just going to say, I think on the influencer side, I mean, that doesn't necessarily work for every single fintech. If it's something that your brand can use, then it's huge. We've got a client that had one influencer in one territory that they wanted to get into, and that one influencer alone basically opened up an entire country for them. It was a significant impact that it had on their bottom line.
Where sometimes fintechs get it wrong is they go to a load of influencers and go for some random posts and think it'll build up into something big. But what happens is, when you're an influencer, because we had one foot in that space as then we moved, transition to brand, you build trust with your community and your audience. And Holly knows if we just did one random post for one random fintech, that would not land with our audience, because they would think, well, why are you promoting this to me? I've never heard you use this before. I've never heard it's important. So Holly plans our weeks into campaigns, whether they're sponsored or not, because it makes sense for our audience. Kind of like, this is our theme this week. So for example, one week last year, we did a legacy week, which was focusing on the fact there's a massive life insurance gap for women, that people haven't got wills sorted, that people are underprotected, and that actually things like pensions can be part of your legacy as well. There's a strategic campaign that gets put in place, and you work with a partner, and probably vastly undercharge and should probably up our fees for the work that we do. But it's because it legitimately, incredibly lands with our audience, doesn't it?
And I think we've grown, like, we don't just have one platform like Instagram. We know people consume content differently. So by building up these channels early on and getting a good audience across them all, we know that we can spread that content across those channels, and we know what kind of engagement we'll get on them. So if it's like a community event, it's going to be much smaller, but the people are more highly engaged. So you're not kind of trudging through the mud trying to find out who your niche is. Like, we've got them. They've got a propensity to buy because they're on a financial wellness journey, and they want to make sure that they're protected in all areas of finance. So it kind of just makes sense. But on the influencer point, I wouldn't want people now who's listening to kind of go out and be like, I'm going to find the biggest influencer and I'm going to pay them a fortune, and all our dreams will come true. We put a lot of eggs in one basket with one particular influencer that we thought would resonate with our community, that they'd just get it, they'd be able to sell the product. And it was a bust. They had like nearly 200,000 followers.
It was rubbish.
We find we've got a micro influencer, so that's a new one for people, where smaller audience, much more highly engaged, aren't bothered that much about getting revenue in for it because they've generally got a full-time job and this is like a bit of a passion project for them. The amount of this one particular person that we've got in our community, whenever she posts about us, she uses the product all the time, gives us constant feedback. When she promotes it, I cannot tell you the difference that we get. So people are quick to look at, these big, massive influencers, but actually, if you go down to a micro level,
10,000 followers, 5,000
they've got
followers.
such a small niche, but such a small engaged community. So I wish sometimes fintechs wouldn't just go for your typical people. I think they just need to. There are many people that are much more influential just on a smaller audience size.
Same question as earlier, actually. Is activity like this scalable for what your ambitions are? And if not, what avenues, are going to contribute to your growth? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to reach those goals?
Firstly, it's definitely something that you have to kind of turn on and off. You couldn't keep momentum up and do it all the time, especially as we're starting to get into the paid space, and we're trying to work out what CAC will be, and lifetime values for us is also interesting because initially our lifetime value is quite small because it's a premium app subscription, but actually when people convert and we get introduced to fees for some products. We don't promote a lot, but when we do, that is involved in the LTV calculation. We're trying to find out how to acquire customers and convert them. What's really hard though is doubling down on actually we just want to help more people. The number of people helped is really important to us. And wherever they are, we just need to try and find them. And there's no point going to a platform that aren't our people, that aren't appropriate for it. I think on Instagram, it's always been our home, for example, and we'll always double down there. We're keeping an eye on other platforms and making sure that we're trying to take advantage of followers in that space. Whether it's scalable or not, possibly not. I do think the days of, getting to 100K even on Instagram are gone. It's a platform that's having its moment and its time. And, that's why we always wanted to build our own platform actually initially, which was we kind of have our destiny in the hands of the social space. We're so purpose driven that at the moment, a big passion of ours is, joining podcasts like yours, but not in the fintech space and in the big wide world and sharing these issues. And that's a big strategy. As you can tell from this session, we do like to talk in the sound of our own voices, but we hope that someone listening will go, you are so right. I've never thought it about like that. I want to know more. And there's a big opportunity for us to do that. I know that's, above the line and it's not necessarily something that you can pin down CAC to at the absolutely narrow level. That's scalable. That's much more scalable if it comes off.
You made a really interesting point there about going on different podcasts and whatnot. We get approached all the time. The space that we're in, we're heavily focused on paid and performance marketing and that sort of stuff. We don't really do any organic at all. And when we're sort of approached by, say, a founder who's either bootstrapping, pre-seed, or a smaller seed round, sort of sub $1 million, they'll ask, what do I do from this point? And the advice that I tend to give them is, well, you need to go out there and go talk to people. And you go, rather than sort of one-to-one, you go through that sort of one-to-many. What's your brand essence or your brand message or whatever you want to call it? Brand steering wheel or, brand insert inanimate object. What is that? And what can you talk about? And where can you take that message? There was a similar sort of product that was more focused on, say, targeting university students. I sort of said, well, why aren't you going to do talks in universities? It just seems like the most common sense thing, and actually, funny enough, the person was a professor, and I was just like, you've got the perfect platform. Just, you don't need me to get you your first 1,000 users or first 2,000 users.
500 quid behind the bar at Leeds Student Union, you've got your first 500 users.
I think people are thinking the world's gone crazy, especially in fintech. It's gone crazy, the amount of funding that people are getting. Everyone's skipping these steps, and we're all guilty of it. Like when I think the first few weeks that we started, well, I was like, we need some PR, and Laura was like, what for? We don't have a product yet. And I was like, right, okay, bring myself back. Like, you have to have a word with yourself and go, right, I've not done the sweat bit yet. Like, you've got to put sweat into it. Like the sweat equity bit of it, like people overlook massively. People jump into funding straight away. And I think we're really blessed that we've gone through this bootstrapping journey because it's made us be like, wear all the hats of all the business with no money. Like, people are wearing all the hats, all the business with all the money, and they're just getting lost because there's so many amazing services and brands out there that can help people grow, but they've not even done the hard work yet in finding out who the customer is, like what works, what doesn't, creating posts on Canva yourself that look like shit, and you laugh at them like a month later going, oh my God, look, no one's going through that like that pain. Yeah, because everyone's just getting these massive rounds straight away and then jumping straight, like trying to skip like 10 steps.
That's a really good point. I think being bootstrapped for a while, or at least having a low, smaller budget, it sharpens your ability to hunt for your customer.
Yes.
And you become really, really resourceful with your time and your energy. And I actually think that if you do that first and then go out and then you're then given a big budget, because you've been through so much of the pain, you know exactly where to direct it and you know what you're going to do with it.
You would perform, I suspect, much better if you can work with a founder or a senior marketer in a business that knows the customer, knows the name, knows where they live, knows how they feel, knows what worries them. Like if a founder stays close to that and then you get a budget behind that, there's like
in our old job, we used to call it a lever. They identified like 3 areas in the business that they were going to pull a lever on, which means injecting cash into and then seeing results come out. So, which is why we're in this really exciting phase now where we're finally putting our money where our mouth is in terms of investing in things like paid ads. We're already seeing the benefits of it. And next month, I can't wait to see the graph to be like, right, we were right. That post worked perfectly well. We've now put more budget behind it. It's really exciting time, but yeah, people are jumping to that and I'm like, you're missing all the fun bit.
like we knew which platform wouldn't perform on paid. Well, it was Facebook, because we're Instagrammers and but a certain demographic did well on Facebook, so we may play around with it. If we hadn't have done that, if we'd have come up with a product and then got a bit of pre-seed and thought, right, let's get some customers, like, oh my gosh, you just wouldn't have known. But like you said, if you can go armed with that bit of knowledge and put it in people like yours hands, you're going to get a leap forward. You really are.
One of the questions we have on our briefing sheet is, do you have any documented user, buyer personas, even like things like basic brand guidelines or,
colours.
They don't mean your colours and what font. I mean, what's your value prop? Is that documented? A lot of people, a majority haven't taken the time to do that. They sort of see that as a bit of mumbo jumbo or not really important, but actually it marshals your thoughts as a business. And gets you really directed and focused as to what you're trying to do. And I think in your go-to-market piece, I mean, you guys have sort of done it through the nature of your product, which is when you're doing your go-to-market piece, it should really be one product, one audience, and a single 1 or 2 messages, and that should be your go-to-market piece. We did a briefing piece and we asked the client, who your target audience is. They gave us one audience, and then the second audience was everyone. And I was like,
everyone. I knew you were going to say
just everyone. You made a lot of really, really good points there, particularly that being bootstrapped as you are at the moment. My question is, are you going to look for funding at any point in the future? Is that in view, or do you sort of intend to stay bootstrapped until you can grow the audience out any further,
So we're currently raising a pre-seed. We are at this point now where, quite a few people have challenged us and said, if you'd have been male, you'd have raised by now, in the nicest possible way. Like they kind of think that, we've been a bit more cautious. We like testing and we like being sure. And I think that works well for us. And now, as Holly said, we're identifying these levers that really we do believe will help grow our business. We can put investment in terms of in people and in resources behind it. So we're currently raising, and we're calling it our pre-seed. A lot of people won't have a product and still raise pre-seed, but we've got one. So we are raising with a plan to really take the business from startup to scale up in the next 12 months.
I think we've lessened the risk for our investors as well because we've done all this work. I find it incredible. Like you can turn up in a hoodie like Silicon Valley and get 300 million for a product that you think is going to change the world. Over in the UK, especially for a B2C product, people are just so when's the return? And you're like, hang on a minute, people are burning through cash in America, but we don't have to do that. Like I said, a previous discussion, we've gone through all that kind of pain, and I genuinely think we've lessened the risk massively for any sort of investment that we get in. And at the same time, we sometimes go we genuinely don't need it. We could go and carry on as ourselves, but we just want to 10x that growth. We're ready to now.
Do you think you would have raised if you were 2 male founders? Do you think that has had an impact on your ability to raise funds?
Very possibly. I think on twofold. I think we as individuals have our backgrounds from a business that squeezed resources as best as possible, performed really well, 24 million profits, business, huge business. And so we've been used to this legacy way of doing it, which is you make money and you reinvest your profits back in, and you make money and you make, and to that end, we're then guilty of taking on too much and not being great delegators and outsourcers because you're just used to kind of soaking up We're absolutely at this point now where we know the things that will help us. We know where we'd like an expert to step in. It takes someone a lot less time than us. And so I think we've been a victim of our own background, which is successful businesses, but you bootstrap and you kind of make it work. Obviously, the tech world is very, very different, especially B2C tech. So I think that's on us. I think the other side is there aren't many female role models that have raised well, that show you how to do it, that give you the confidence. You know, the people we speak to on the other side of the table, they're male, and you do get asked different questions. You do get treated differently. We're seeing a bit of a change. I think there's a lot of effort in the industry to kind of lift it. And we're on quite a lot of round tables. I think it's a combination of both, don't you think?
Yeah, I know in the past there hasn't been a lot of role models, but only recently we started to see people come through. So like Jess Alderson of like So Synced has done like an amazing job of being a bit of a mentor and helping us through like this like funding round, and people closer to home like Amy from Collective, who's based up in Manchester, doing amazing jobs, CEOs of their businesses, but then doing amazing rounds as well, and kind of helping women up the ladder behind them. And I think there's people like Jess Jackson in Manchester that is head of like Fund Her North and GC Angels, and they're trying to like raise this flag for women, aren't they, and kind of like help us all. But I mean, we've only started raising before Christmas and we're nearly there, so we've done that. I think it's due to us doing the hard work beforehand. Like I said, we're probably not a big risk for people because we know what we're talking about. We've got a product, we've got a community, we're growing, we're testing, we're reinvesting profits. Like we're a safe bet, I think.
I'd invest in us.
Yeah, I'd invest in us. Yeah.
I suppose one of the questions that might come up is the size of your total addressable market. Is there a limited number of people in the UK that want financial well-being? I would guess that your growth plans would have to include expanding beyond the UK in order to make it a scalable business.
Correct.
So yeah, is that market big enough?
So there's a couple of things. One is that a separate market to us is B2B. So we offer our product is a financial wellness product that helps people get better with money, take control. And if they need products and services on that journey, we don't over promote, but that's a secondary revenue stream for the business. But solely it's a subscription-based business. And it's simple tech, and it will remain simple because, like I said earlier, we want to be kind of different. And so we've seen great interest from companies that want to provide this to their people, which was not a strategy of ours. Everyone's always said this would be great as an employee benefit, but like the Headspace concept, help people with mental health, will help people with financial wellness. And you go to work for money. And so why doesn't the employer have a vested interest in how you use that money? Imagine if an employer can help someone hit their goals of going to Disneyland or buying a house or retiring with dignity. Do they have enough for retirement? So we're in the space, we're actually being bombarded quite a lot by businesses, and we've got a couple that are launching this week where they're going to take bulk subscriptions. So in terms of a cash flow basis and a high margin business, they're buying licenses of our product for their people, even if not everyone will use it, because a good proportion will use some of it and then some will go really hardcore in it. So in that sense, it's a very scalable, very British B2B SaaS model. The other side to it though is because it's pre-advice. So obviously when you do the playbook and you see the process, it's basic money management and then it's education. It's completely prone to internationalization because the actual individual words may change, and just as you want to be relevant to every culture, there's still this basic money management need in lots of environments. And so, I mean, there's a couple of obvious, America's big and it's tough to track, but they've got a real problem with consumer debt and they're quite wealthy as a generation. So the potential for someone to manage their money better and do well is great there. Same as Australia, maybe Canada. We were laughing with a amazing head of marketing who's French, who was saying, what is this obsession with the British in debt? Like in France, it's embarrassing to spend money that you don't have. I loved that, but what she said was actually French people have an issue with investing, like they love the savings, but they've got a problem with developing their wellness that way. So international is definitely on our cards, but the priority for the next 12 months is go all in on our size of market. I mean, there's 26 million workers in our age target in the UK. Think about that, even getting 1% of that will get us off on a really good track.
Cool. We've covered an awful lot throughout this. I was going to jump to our quick fire round, which is a little less fintech focused and a little bit more relaxed. So, seeing there's two of you, what song do you both have on repeat right now?
Anything from Adele's album. Anything.
Coco Melon. Because I've got a 3-year-old that never turns it off.
Right.
So Encanto.
Fair enough.
You give like 7 answers.
Sexy answers.
Not so much a quick fire round when you speak to 2 sisters from Wigan.
Other than your app, what fintech app do you use the most?
Oh, that's a good question. Starling.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Ooh,
I'd agree with that. And what TV show are you binging right now?
Ted Lasso.
I've heard that's really good.
Oh my God, watch it. She's still not watched it. Oh my gosh. I can't vibe with her.
I have an Apple subscription and I already have a Netflix subscription and I don't want to get another subscription.
Do you not have a family member that you can be a parasite for? Because that's what I've done.
No, every Jack's mine. That's what it is, right? So
that's why she's good with the money management, because she uses everyone else's subscription.
100%. You all do it.
It's not the money
top tip.
It's not the money platform she's created. It's the fact that she utilizes everyone else's subscription.
100%.
That was Spotify family subscription as well.
What about you?
I think mine is like a absolute trash because I've got 2 young kids and I'm dead at the end of the day. So like a Selling Sunset.
My wife watches that.
Great.
I judge her for it. She also watches EastEnders, and I really judge her for that.
Oh yeah, no.
That's a difference. There's a difference between the houses on that.
Yeah. What's the best bit of life advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh, like I'm rubbish at this.
I love it. I'm a highly anxious person, and I love it. This is a sarcastic answer to your question when people say, "Don't worry." Saying that to someone that performs on a highly anxious level all day, every day, to just say someone, just don't worry. And when I say people, I mean my husband, that's like the most carefree opposite to me. Opposites definitely do attract. So we've got laid back Larry over there, and I'm hysterical Holly over here. And the best bit of advice that I get is, don't worry.
Mine is be scrappy. So a COO of a really cool tech brand told us that early on, and that tech brand are now taking our product actually on a B2B basis. And every time we come up against something, or we don't think something's perfect, or we think we need to pay a load of money for something, we remember that she said be scrappy, and they are a huge business. And she said, in fact, the other day she was like, we're still a startup. I'm like, no, you're not. And so be scrappy, because it doesn't have to be perfect.
I love that. I built Growth Gorilla's website for less than £100 and it stayed up for a year and a half. I'm surprised I got any customers, to put it that way.
There we go. But you could have spent 10 grand on it and not have had any customers, and so you've done it the right way around. Love it.
I love being scrappy and finding cheaper ways to do something. Absolutely. If you could tell your younger selves one thing, what would it be?
Invest in your pension.
Yeah. Oh my God, compound interest.
Yeah, love it. Do you know what? I won't entertain. If any of my team ask me about, obviously, the 3% contribution or whatever, they'll go, do we need to do that? I won't even entertain it. I'll ignore the message coming in. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to let any of them not contribute to their pension. It's insane. Yeah. It's free money. Do it.
Yeah. Yes, you should be telling them to put up to 15% is ideal.
Love it. Never let them. Yeah, you are a very good boss. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't let them take it out because it's just nonsense. And that's that's because I only started my pension in December last year.
Yeah.
So
you're like, I've got 20 years on you, mate. Like, you better knuckle down. That's what I tell people younger than me. I'm like, please don't. We had some freelancers working for us interns, and we were like, while you work here, you need to open a pension, even though it wasn't like a workplace one. They were interns, and we were like, and you're going to put money into it. Like, just so passionate about it. See so many people come out the other side of pensions miserable, devastated, mentally like unwell, basically. And I think that's a great bit of advice.
Free money, crazy not to. Who in the world of fintech would you most like to take to lunch?
Romy Savova, the founder of Pension Bee.
Oh, cool.
CEO of Klarna. Just to pay.
We'll pay, and we won't pay in 3 or 6. Which one?
You can't show us.
It's in, by the way.
No.
Yeah, it's all right. And we'll pay in cash because we've got the money.
We'll pay in full. Yeah. CEO of Klarna, and we're going to pay in full.
No hard feelings at all. We would love to take the CEO of Klarna out for lunch.
Oh, the business that they've built is phenomenal. Like, didn't they say like they've made 1,000 millionaires or something?
Yeah,
from 100. I can't remember.
When 1,000.
Yeah, when they floated.
Wow.
Like,
well, not floated yet, but their investments made 1,000 millionaires. Where would we go to eat?
Nando's. I'm not taking them out anywhere nice, but Nando's.
Whoa, what's wrong with Nando's? What do you mean it's not nice?
No, as in like it's cost effective. Yeah. As in I'm not gonna splash the cash because then I would have to pay in 3. So it's gonna have to be somewhere that
we almost fell out there. Like you can't knock around. You can't knock all Nando's perfect, like rubbish.
I love Nando's.
Yeah.
I can't live without a good Nando's. Might have one tonight.
Yeah.
And then my favourite question, which is also my interview question, which is, what's one thing I haven't asked that you think I should have asked?
Oh my God, would I get a job? Because I don't know what to answer this one. Maybe why do you do what you do?
Go on then.
I do what I do because I wish I would have been taught this, that there's a different way when it comes to money, and that taking control and focusing on wellness rather than wealth is one of the most empowering things you can do for yourself. And we are reluctant entrepreneurs. We had great jobs. We were carrying along in our own world, but we were pissed off and we were annoyed that this wasn't being taught. And so when things get tough and when things are hard and we wonder why we're doing this, we get a message on Instagram saying, "You have changed my life." I'll never get that in another job. I will never get that in another business now. Why do I do what I do? Is because it's missing and it genuinely helps people.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think more so, I know we're financial wellness and that's for everyone, but particularly women. There's so many women that are sat at home that have let their partners just take control of the finances and they're missing out on so much. I think we mentioned earlier, like I've had 2 children and that's absolutely burned me in terms of my pension. Like my husband, his company were extremely supportive in paternity leave, and he earned more in 6 weeks of paternity leave than I did in 2 years of maternity leave.
Wow.
And that type of like stats, I just know there's so many women sat at home and I'm just desperate for them to just like have a light bulb moment with us and just go all in on the finances and just like empower themselves and get knowledge and take control. I see so many brands taking money out of their pocket every month for them to have their hair done, nails done, look a certain way, feel a certain way. And I just think, oh, there's so much I wish you knew. And I just want to get in front of those people.
And maybe there's a man sat at home who's got a partner who has gone, I have never thought about it that way. I'm going to go look into this. And that's the best thing we can have. Like we've got so many male champions because we're female focused, but we're not just for females. That's why we do what we do, so that we can have a cocktail with someone and go, do you invest? And they go, what? Who are you? Why are you asking this question?
To be fair, that's actually kind of made me think a little bit as well. But then I just realised that my wife's got a bigger pension than I have, so it's not too bad.
Then you're like, all is well with the world, carry on.
Yeah. So I'm like, no, I haven't dropped the ball. That's absolutely fine. and then here's another question that my wife and I always debate: joint accounts or separate accounts?
Depends.
It's a really good question.
So if you feel that you're in a very financially secure and just a secure relationship in terms of how you feel and how it's going, it is the best thing that you can do as a team, because if you manage your finances together as a team, no matter what happens, first there's a feeling of abundance because it's money all in one place. Our budget teaches you to put everything in the top. And you feel this like, your child maintenance might go in, or child benefit, or pensions revenue if you've got it, or rental, everything goes in the top. And you feel like you've got more, and that helps you feel better. And so when you do that, then if one of you goes on maternity leave, or if one of you gets sick, or if one of you earns less, it's just not an issue. It's not mine and your money, because we see lots of couples split things. And it's just wholly inappropriate if the male is earning a lot less than the female and they split 50-50, because you're not equal. But the big problem with joint accounts is if you are not in a financially stable relationship, or if one person has a particular spending problem or a spending preference, it's not even a problem, it can cause massive rifts. So we tell people in the playbook, like, explore this with your partner and think about how you feel about this, because you will not argue about money as much if you're on the same page, if you combine them, if you're in a good place to start off with. And the big thing we see is financial infidelity is called, where people do things behind the partner's back when it comes to money and finances, secret debts, and also things like women being stuck. And it could happen to male, but you hear it a lot about it with women, where financially they can't leave. They're stuck in a place that they're completely unhappy, but they've no control. So it's a great thing. And I'm so glad you asked that question, for people to sit and ponder. And we've got probably really good articles actually on our website where we've debated it with people and asked people's opinions. Like, find the thing that works for you. Don't feel it as a right or wrong way. Out of interest, how do you go in your household? What's the deal with?
It's a little different now that because I'm Greg is a limited company, but when we were both working, everything just went into one pot. All our bills come out, and we had a separate account where I would chuck some cash into, and that would be our spending money for the month. and then the rest would go into savings, investments, and all the rest of it. Now it's a little different because obviously the company's effectively like our investment asset.
Yeah.
And my wife's just coming off maternity leave now as well, so she's going back into the workforce. So,
but that's a good example of, for a period of time, she's not bringing revenue in. Like, if it was everyone put 50-50 in, no questions asked, that's just really difficult for the person that's not earning as much.
And I think right at the beginning of our conversation, we highlighted that women control 85% of the world's spending. An article that I put on LinkedIn a while ago, and it got so much reaction, was from me saying, like, to males in a couple environment, if it's male and female, you don't understand how much women are paying out for things like school trips, birthday presents, mother-in-law birthday presents,
Christmas,
children's shoes, children's school uniform. Like, it always seems to be because the woman's the one out and about, unfortunately, still in, 2022. If you're not in an equal partnership marriage, they're spending a hell of a lot more. So if they get paid less in the first instance and they've got more coming out in terms of like spend for gifts, bloody baby shower gifts,
hen parties and all the rest of it.
There's an absolute cost that comes to being a woman. Like, everyone wants to buy the friend flowers, everyone wants to buy the friend a welcome, a new home gift. As a female, you're pressured to spend all of this money. You've got less coming in anyway. So I think sometimes when it's that not a joint account, it's just an unfair balance. But it's definitely each to their own. And like Laura said, we get a lot of horror stories from people who have had that trust in what they thought was a trusting financial relationship, and then unfortunately they've been burned. But also people that are so restricted in that they don't have this feeling of abundance and putting everything together. So it's definitely a case by case, but something for people to explore.
Great question, like it.
It's always been a curious one because I've never understood like the whole separate thing. Like we just sort of pile it all in. A few times in my career, I've not worked or not brought an income in for over a year while I was setting up my businesses, and my wife basically supported us, made it happen. Because if she hadn't done that, then I wouldn't set up my first company, and I wouldn't have set up Growth Gorilla, right? So, without that commitment. So I've never sort of seen it any other way, and she wouldn't let me do it any other way either. So
Who's the boss in your relationship? It sounds equal, actually.
It's pretty equal. She's the one who sort of gets me to spend money. Good. She's very sort of measured with the way she does spend.
Some people have like a scarcity mindset where they feel like if they spend anything, something bad's going to happen. Like you say, like whether it's a cultural thing or like just something that's been in your family or your friendship groups or whatever. Like some people just have a fear of parting with money, full stop. And then that's at the other end of the spectrum. We've got people that like are just freely spending money, X, Y, and Z, no risk. And then another person that actually it makes them feel not great that they can't part with money. There's a definitely.
I would say not because of my wife, but it physically hurts me to actually have to spend money. I hate it.
I think when you do our plan, once you get all those like strong financial foundations in place and you can see that you've got this excess, it's like a P&L, you've got this excess left over, you feel a bit more free and that you have got this money to spend. Sometimes it's just seeing it in a different light. So I'm definitely going to get you to go through the playbook now.
I'd be happy to go through it and have a look.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on today.
It was so good chatting. It felt like we could have had a beer chatting instead of being a recorded formal podcast.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.